The most feared secret police in Chinese history was born from a starving boy's empty bowl. This is the story of Zhu Yuanzhang, the beggar who became emperor, then turned his entire empire into a prison.
Not the fairy tale of a rags to riches emperor. The dark truth of how trauma breaks even one of the most powerful men in the world.
Today, we audit the past and uncover how a starving boy's pain created the most terrifying surveillance state in ancient history. Welcome to Orient Obscura. We don't just tell stories. We audit the past.
And to set the stakes here, this isn't just a story about a tyrant or a spy agency. This is a story we can all understand. What happens to you when the thing that kept you alive as a child becomes the thing that destroys you as an adult? What happens when your deepest fear becomes your only way to rule?
Let's start at the bottom. The place where every choice Zhu Yuanzhang ever made was born. In 1344, China was collapsing under the rule of the Mongol Yuan dynasty. The Yellow River flooded, crops failed, and a brutal famine swept across the land. 16-year-old Zhu Yuanzhang watched as his father, his mother, and his older brother starved to death, one by one. He didn't even have a piece of land to bury them. He wrapped their bodies in straw and begged a local landlord for a tiny corner of his field just to give his family a grave.
Think about that for a second. By the time he was 16, he'd lost everything. No family, no home, no food, no safety. And the worst part? It wasn't a natural disaster that took everything from him. It was people. People with power who didn't care if he lived or died.
And that's the brutal truth at the heart of this story. It wasn't the flood or the famine that killed his family. It was the corrupt Yuan officials. They stole the grain that was meant for famine relief. They lined their own pockets, while people like Zhu Yuanzhang's family starved to death in the dirt. This is the moment the Beggar King was born. Not when he won his first battle, but when he realized a brutal truth. The system doesn't care if you live or die. The only way to survive is to control everything.
And that's the part that so many histories leave out. This isn't a story about a man who was born evil. This is a boy who learned, in the most brutal way possible, that the people with power will always lie to you, will always steal from you, will always let you die if it benefits them. That lesson didn't just make him tough. It broke something in him, something that would never heal, even when he sat on the dragon throne.
For the next few years, he survived any way he could. He begged on the streets. He lived in a Buddhist monastery. He watched more people die around him. Then, in 1352, he joined a rebel army, fighting to overthrow the Yuan dynasty. And here's what no one tells you. He didn't win the war with bravery or luck. He won it because he trusted no one. He'd already learned that anyone can betray you. Anyone can turn on you the second it benefits them. So he studied his enemies. He studied his allies. He learned to read every lie, every hidden motive, every potential betrayal before it happened.
And this is where the audit really begins, right? We all think if we just had enough power, enough money, enough control, our fears would go away. But Zhu Yuanzhang had absolute power, and his fears only got worse. Because now he had more to lose than ever. Now he had an empire to lose. An empire he'd built with his own two hands, out of the ashes of his family. He couldn't let it be taken away, like everything else had been.
By 1368, he'd done the impossible. He'd overthrown the Yuan dynasty, unified China, and founded the Ming Dynasty. The starving beggar boy was now the emperor of the largest empire on earth. He had everything: absolute power, endless wealth, the loyalty of an entire nation. But he was never safe, because the boy who watched his family starve never went away. At first, he tried to fix the system that had broken him. He wrote strict laws against corruption. He executed corrupt officials. He cut taxes for farmers. He tried to make sure no family ever had to starve like his did. But it wasn't enough, because he couldn't control what people thought. He couldn't control what they said behind closed doors. He couldn't control whether his allies, his generals, even his own family, were plotting against him. He'd spent his whole life learning that the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. And now, Everyone around him was hungry for his power. Everyone wanted what he had. So he built a tool that would let him see everything, hear everything, control everything. A tool that was nothing more than his own trauma made real. The embroidered uniform guard, the Jianyiwei.
And this is the part that most Western histories get wrong. They talk about the embroidered uniform guard like it's just a Chinese version of the secret police, a tool of tyranny to keep the people in line. But that's not what it was. Not for Zhu Yuanzhang. This was his insurance policy. This was his way to make sure he never, ever, was helpless again. Never again would he watch someone he loved die because someone in power lied to him. Never again would he be in the dark.
The guard reported directly to him, and only him. They had absolute power. They could arrest anyone, interrogate anyone, execute anyone, anywhere in the empire, no trial, no approval needed. They spied on generals, on government officials, on his own family members, even on ordinary people. There's a famous story that sums it all up. A senior official named Song Lian had a dinner party with his friends at his home. The next day, Zhu Yuanzhang called him into the palace and asked him how the dinner went. What did you eat? Who was there? What did you talk about? Song Lian told him the truth, every single detail. And then Zhu Yuanzhang pulled out a piece of paper. A detailed report of the dinner, written by a spy who'd been in the room the entire night. He even had a drawing of where everyone was sitting.
Imagine being in that room. You're having a quiet dinner with your friends, and there's a spy in the room, writing down every single word you say. And the emperor knows everything, before the sun even rises. That's the world Zhu Yuanzhang built. A world where no one was safe, no one was trusted, no one could speak freely.
Think about that. The Emperor of China, spending his nights reading reports about what his officials ate for dinner. Why? Because the starving boy who had nothing to eat was now watching every single person who had more than enough. Every single man who could become the corrupt official who killed his family. Every single man in a silk robe had a shadow behind him. A man in a flying fish uniform with an embroidered blade. And behind every single one of those guards stood that starving boy in the dirt, watching.
That's the tragedy of this story. He built this entire system to protect himself, to protect his empire, to make sure no one ever felt the pain he felt. But all he did was spread that pain. He turned his own trauma into the trauma of an entire empire. He became the thing he hated most. He became the tyrant who made people live in fear. Just like the corrupt Yuan officials who killed his family.
And it only got worse. In 1380, he accused his own prime minister of treason and executed him. Then he used that as an excuse to purge the entire government. Over 15 years, he executed more than 40,000 people. Generals, officials, scholars, even their entire families. Anyone he even suspected of being a threat. He killed every single person who could possibly betray him. He built the most perfect surveillance system the ancient world had ever seen. He controlled every single detail of his empire. And still, he was never safe. He was never happy. He was never not afraid. He spent his whole life running from the hunger and the fear of his childhood. And in the end, he was still that 16-year-old boy, alone in the dirt, with nothing. In 1398, Zhu Yuanzhang died at the age of 69, alone in his palace. The beggar who became emperor, who built one of the greatest dynasties in Chinese history, died as he had lived, surrounded by shadows and fear.
And this is the through line of every emperor we've audited so far. Li Shimin killed his brothers for power and spent the rest of his life haunted by guilt. Qin Shi Huang drank poison chasing immortality and died before his 50th birthday. Zhu Yuanzhang built an entire surveillance state to escape his trauma and became a prisoner of it. Absolute power doesn't fix the thing that broke you. It only amplifies it. It only makes it worse.
That's the final audit of Zhu Yuanzhang, the Beggar King. He didn't build the embroidered uniform guard to control his empire. He built it to control his own fear. He didn't turn into a monster because he was evil. He turned into a monster because he thought that was the only way to survive. The empire he built lasted nearly 300 years, but the prison he built for himself lasted his entire life.
Now it's your turn to weigh in. If you'd lived through what Zhu Yuanzhang lived through, if you'd watched your family starve, if you'd learned that the world only cares about power, would you have done the same thing? Would you build a surveillance state to keep yourself safe? Would you sacrifice your humanity to never be helpless again?
Drop your answer in the comments below. We read every single one, and we'll be replying to as many as we can in the next 24 hours. If you love this deep audit of the hidden history behind China's most unlikely emperor, if you want more stories about the impossible choices that define the most powerful men in history, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This is Orient Obscura, and every single week, we unlock the obscure parts of the past that textbooks leave out. We don't just tell stories. We audit the past. Next episode, we're diving into the most underrated emperor in Chinese history. The man who ended 300 years of war, built a system that lasted 1,300 years, and watched his entire empire collapse in just one generation. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.